My name is Morgan Atwood and I am 34 years old. I want you to picture a private dining room at 600 on a Saturday. 20 people, candlelight. My sister's engagement ring, catching every one of those little flames. I am standing in the doorway in a plain gray dress, and my mother is smiling at the groom's family, like she has been waiting all her life for this exact table. She lifts her wine and she says, warm as anything, "This is our other daughter, she cleans homes." My father chuckles into his glass. We stopped expecting anything from her years ago. A few people laugh, the polite kind. Then the groom's mother turns around. She looks at me slow from my shoes to my face and something in her expression falls open. She stands up. "Wait," she says. "Aren't you the woman who?" And she stops. She just stops. The whole room goes quiet, forks in the air. And my mother's face drains white like she has seen a ghost at her own party. What happened in the next 10 minutes rewrote 15 years of the story my family told about me. But to understand why my mother went pale, I have to take you back. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, where quiet people finally get the last word, and the ones who counted them out learn what they were really worth. If a family ever decided your value for you, you are among friends here. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. 6 weeks before that dinner, I was sitting in a small office at 5 in the morning and the whole building smelled like floor wax. That smell is my whole life. Honestly, I could bottle it. I had a stack of payroll to approve before the sun came up. 180 names. Every one of them a person who trusted me to get the math right. My company is called Reliant Facility Group. We clean hospitals, corporate campuses, care homes, the kind of buildings where a missed corner can shut the doors for good. I built it from a mop and a used sedan. On paper, I am a business owner. In my mother's version of events, I help out at a cleaning place. I have never corrected her, and I know how that sounds. You are already asking why. Fair. I used to ask myself the same thing at that desk. Coffee going cold. Initching checks for 180 families while my own family thought I could barely feed myself. The truth is, correcting my mother has never once gone the way you would think. She has a talent. She can take anything you hand her, anything good, and set it on a shelf where it turns into a lie by morning. So I learned to keep the good things where she could not reach them. That morning, I signed the last check, locked the office, and drove to the first site while it was still dark. A nurse held the door for me on my way in, and called me Miss Atwood, and I felt more seen by a stranger in scrubs than I had felt at a family table in a decade. I did not know yet that in 6 weeks a woman I had never met would stand up in a candle-lit room and call me that same name, and that it would end everything my parents had built on my silence. The call came on a Tuesday, and it was Delia, not my mother, which told me everything before she said a word. My sister only calls me when there is a job to assign. "Morgan," she said bright and quick, "big news, I'm engaged." I said, "Congratulations." And I meant it mostly. Then came the reason for the call. "Mom wants you at the engagement dinner. Please, just, don't make it weird." I asked what weird would look like. "Dress simple," she said. "Nothing flashy. These are the bosses. They're old Millbrook money, so just be normal." Okay. Old money. That was funny to me in a way I did not say out loud. I told her I would come. There was a pause, and then she added the part she had been circling. "And maybe don't go on and on about the cleaning stuff. Mom worries you'll bring the mood down." I looked out my office window at the sign on the far wall, the client board, one name catching the light. I said, "I won't bring the mood down, Dia." She laughed, relieved, already gone in her head to seating charts. After she hung up, I sat there longer than I meant to. Voss's, Cedar Hollow. The two names lived in the same drawer in my memory, and I had spent 6 years keeping that drawer shut. My sister thought she was warning me to behave in front of important people. She had no idea she had just invited me back to the one building in that town that knew exactly who I was. I told myself it did not matter. I would wear the plain dress. I would sit quietly. I would let my mother run her little show, and I would drive the 90 minutes home before dessert. That was the plan. I am telling you now so you can watch it fall apart with me. The next morning, I drove past the Reliant offices before my first meeting, and I stopped in the lot longer than I needed to. Engine running. Looking up at our client board through the glass. It is a simple thing that board white letters on a dark panel, the accounts. We are proud of Regional Medical Hartwell Corporate Campus, and near the top where it has been for 6 years, Cedar Hollow Senior Living. I sat there, and I let myself remember it just for a minute. The way the state inspector's letter had looked on Margaret Voss's desk. The way her hands had shaken. I never told my family about Cedar Hollow. I never told them about any of the accounts. But that one I kept especially close, because that one had a face attached to it. An old woman who had gripped my wrist and said thank you like it was a prayer. My family thought I scrubbed strangers' bathrooms for cash. They were not entirely wrong about how I started. They were just 15 years behind. My phone buzzed against the cup holder and cut the memory clean in half. It was Marisol, my operations manager, and her voice had the flat calm she only used when something was actually wrong. Night crew flagged a biohazard spill at regional 3rd floor. I've got it contained, but I need your sign-off on the incident report before day shift. I told her I was on my way. I put the car in drive and let Cedar Hollow slide out of the mirror behind me. It is strange looking back, how the universe was already lining the pieces up. While I thought I was just going to work, my sister was picking a venue. My mother was rehearsing a story, and I was staring at a name on a wall half smiling, keeping the one secret that was about to walk into a candle-lit room and sit down at the head of the table. To tell you how I ended up cleaning houses at 19, I have to take you to a kitchen table in the spring of 2011. I had an acceptance letter in my hand and a scholarship that covered half. My parents sat across from me with their coffee, and they had already decided. I could see it. The way you can see weather coming. My father did the talking. The money's only good for one of you, he said. And Delia needs the stability more. Delia was 14. There was no application, no plan, nothing on the table for her. There was just the sentence and the way my mother nodded along, folding her hands like the matter had been prayed over and settled. I asked how I was supposed to pay the other half. My mother looked at me with those soft, wounded eyes she uses like a shield and said, "You've always been the strong one, Morgan. We knew you'd figure it out. That was it. That was the whole inheritance. You've always been the strong one." I want to be honest about what that did to me, because it did not break me the way a movie would have it. It made me cold, and it made me quick. I packed a bag. I found a room to rent from a widow 2 towns over, $40 a week. And I answered an ad for a cleaning crew that needed someone who could start Monday. My hands were raw by Friday. I learned a building by its floors, which is a thing I still say to my crews, because it is true of buildings, and it is true of families. You want to know what is really going on in a house. You look at the parts nobody thinks matters. I was 19 scrubbing baseboards in strangers' homes, and I already understood something my parents never would. The people who do the invisible work are the ones holding the whole place up. The night I left home, my father said the sentence that would follow me for 15 years. And the worst part is he did not even say it to me. I was loading my bag into the trunk of that old sedan when Mr. Howren from next door came out to see about the noise. My father stood on the porch with his arms crossed and said loud enough to carry. Loud enough that he had to know I could hear. "Morgan's moving out. We stopped expecting anything from her years ago." Then he laughed and Mr. Howren laughed too. An easy neighborly laugh, like my father had made a joke about a dog that would not learn tricks. I stood there with my hand on the trunk lid. I did not cry, though I am not going to pretend I was made of stone. I just closed the trunk quiet, and I got in the car, and I drove away, with that sentence sitting in the passenger seat. We stopped expecting anything from her. He said it like relief, like they had put down something heavy. For years, I turned it over, trying to hear it as a wound. And eventually, I understood it was worse than a wound. It was permission. My father had given the whole family permission to stop seeing me. And once a family agrees to stop seeing you, you can do anything, build anything, become anyone, and they will look right through it, because the story is already written and nobody wants to reread. I did not know driving away that night that I would spend the next 15 years proving him wrong in silence and never once collecting on it. I only knew that I had a room, a bucket, and a Monday start time. Some people get sent off to college with a car full of dorm supplies. I got sent off with a sentence. I decided somewhere on that dark highway that I would make it a foundation instead of an epitaph. People imagine building a company as one big leap. It is not. It is 10 Zellos and smalls. By 2013 I had more houses than ours. So, I started turning clients away. And that is when I understood I could hire. In 2014, I put on 2 people. Both women who needed the same start I had, and I paid them $1 more an hour than anyone else in that town would. I did the books at night. I learned what a certificate of insurance was and a net 30 invoice, and how to walk into an office, building, and talk to a facilities manager like I belonged there, because I did. In 2017, we landed our first commercial contract, a dental group with 4 locations. And I remember signing it in my car because I did not have a real office yet. I sat in the parking lot and I did not call anyone. That is the part that matters. Looking back, there was no one to call. My family did not know I existed as anything but a cautionary tale. And I had built a professional life so private that the only people who knew my worth were my clients and my crews. I told myself that was fine. I told myself the work was the reward. And the work was good. It truly was. There is a clean pride in walking through a building at dawn and knowing every surface is safe, because your people made it so. But a private life gets very quiet at Thanksgiving. It gets very quiet at every table where your mother introduces you as the daughter who never amounted to much. I learned a building by its floors. And I learned my own family by what they refused to look at. What they refused to look at was that the strong one they had thrown away had not sunk. She had gone and built something with 180 people standing on it. You are probably wondering why I kept going back to them at all. I wondered too for years, usually in the car on the drive home. The honest answer is that my father got sick. Around 2016, his heart started giving out in the slow, expensive way American hearts do. And I watched my parents pretend they had it handled while the bills stacked up on the counter where anyone could see them. I could not unsee them. That is my particular flaw, if you want to name it. I am the person who cannot walk past a mess she knows how to clean. Somebody has to, I would tell myself. And I said it so often, it stopped being a thought and became a reflex. Somebody has to. So, I kept the door open. I showed up at Christmas and sat through my mother's little performances. I let my father repeat his favorite line. We stopped expecting anything from her years ago, which had by then curdled into a family joke, the kind everyone at the table laughs at while watching to see if you will finally flinch. I never flinched. I want to be clear that I was not staying out of weakness, and I was not staying because I did not understand what they thought of me. I understood perfectly. I stayed because I had done the math, and the math said that if I walked away completely, my father would lose the house, and I was not willing to buy my dignity with his roof. That is a specific kind of trap. The kind that looks like love from the outside and feels like a bill you keep choosing to pay. Every year I told myself I would stop. Every year the reflex won. I kept going back and I kept my mouth shut, and the whole time I was quietly holding up the very people who had agreed out loud to stop expecting me to. The week before the dinner, I stood in front of my closet and did the thing I always do, which is dress for the version of me my family will allow. I have good clothes. I have clothes I wear to sign contracts that would make my mother's jaw unhinge. I did not take any of them off the hanger. I chose a plain gray dress, the kind that says nothing, because Delia had asked me to say nothing, and I had spent 15 years being fluent in nothing. I held it up in the mirror, and I made myself a promise. I would go. I would smile at the right moments. I would let my mother introduce me however she needed to, and I would drive the 90 minutes home before the plates were cleared. I even planned my exit line. Early meeting, so sorry. Congratulations again. I had it ready. I want you to hear that promise clearly. The one where I stayed small and left early because I kept it right up until the moment I could not. There was a part of me, the part I do not always admit to, that hoped this time would be different. Not because they had changed. They had not. But because some small, stubborn corner of me still believed that if I gave enough, quietly enough, for long enough, one day someone at that table would look up and finally see me. I know how that sounds coming from a grown woman who runs a company. Hope is not logical. Hope is the last thing to leave a person, and mine had held on through a lot. I zipped the dress into a garment bag. I set my alarm. I told myself for the 100th time that this was probably the last family thing I would ever try to be part of, and that I would get through it the way I get through everything, by keeping my hands steady and my mouth closed. I almost did. I drove into Millbrook 3 days early because my mother had called and asked me to help get things ready, and helping is a word my mother uses the way a foreman uses it. 75 miles 90 minutes, the same stretch of highway I had been driving in both directions for 15 years. I did not stay at the house. I never stay at the house. I booked a room at the Millbrook Inn out by the highway, because I learned a long time ago that a hotel room is the one place in that town where my mother cannot rearrange me. I unpacked, hung the gray dress, and drove over to my parents' place, the house I quietly own the deed to, though not one of them knows that. My mother met me at the door already talking. "Oh good. You're here. I need you to run to the caterer, and the linens came in the wrong ivory. And honestly, Morgan, the Voses are very particular people." I said I would handle the linens. She looked at me the way she looks at me. A quick head to appraisal, checking that I had come dressed appropriately for the role of the helpful, unimpressive daughter. I had gray cardigan, sensible shoes. I passed inspection. What I noticed standing in that front hall was how completely my mother had already cast the weekend. She was not organizing an engagement dinner, she was staging a production, and she had assigned me a part before I walked in the door. The part I always play, the reliable set of hands nobody thanks in the program. I took the linen order and I went to fix the ivory. And the whole time I could feel the shape of the thing she was building. This careful, gleaming presentation of the Atwood family for the important new in-laws. She had every prop in place, she just did not know that the venue itself was going to betray her. That evening, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table for what she called a little talk, which is my mother's phrase for handing you a script. She poured us both tea I did not want. "Now, Saturday," she began, "I want everything to go smoothly. The Vosses are important, Morgan. Margaret Voss practically runs half the good in this town." I said I was sure it would be lovely. "So, when it comes to your situation," she said, and she waved her hand at me like my life was a stain she was choosing to overlook. "Let me do the introductions. You don't need to get into the cleaning business. People don't know what to do with that." I asked her what she planned to say I did. She smiled, pleased I had asked because it let her rehearse. "I'll just say you help out at a cleaning company. It's simple." "It's true enough. True enough." I filed that away. Then she reached across and patted my hand and delivered the part she had really sat me down for. "After everything I've done to hold this family together, all I'm asking is one nice night. Don't make it about you. I want you to sit in that sentence with me, because I have heard versions of it my entire life. After everything I've done." My mother has never in her life done the thing, she is always claiming credit for the mortgage. She brags to the church about surviving. I paid the stability she gave Delia instead of me. I later funded, But she says after everything I've done with such practiced ache that people believe her, and for a long time, God helped me. So did I. I sat there with my cold tea and I nodded. I let her think she had me managed. Inside, though, something had started to turn. Quiet and slow. Like a key finding the right groove. She was so busy directing me. She had no idea what I already knew about Saturday's venue. The night before the big dinner, my parents hosted a smaller family supper, and it was a kind of rehearsal for how the weekend would treat me. Delia floated in glowing, her ring out ahead of her like a headlight. She hugged me the way you hug a coworker at a funeral, brief and aimed past your shoulder. "Morgan," she said, settling into her chair. "Are you still doing the houses thing, cleaning?" She said it the way you would ask a relative if they were still into a hobby they should have outgrown. My mother didn't miss the opening. "She cleans home, sweetheart," she said, patting Delia's hand. "Let's not make it a whole thing at the table. A whole thing." As if my entire livelihood were an awkward topic to be steered around like an uncle's politics. I passed the potatoes. I said the houses thing was going fine. And I watched because watching is what I do, and what I saw sharpened everything. My father shook a pill from an amber bottle beside his plate, a heart medication. I recognized an expensive one, the kind that runs $300 a month, even with the good insurance. I knew the exact figure because I was the reason the insurance was still good. 2 years back, when their plan lapsed in the gap between my father's jobs, I had quietly covered the premium through a broker who never used my name. My father swallowed his pill and complained about the price of everything. And my mother sighed about how hard they had it. And Delia nodded along, and I sat there holding a fork, the invisible hinge the whole door swung on. Nobody at that table could have told you the truth if their lives depended on it. The truth was that the medication keeping my father alive, the roof over their heads, and the nursing degree that let Delia call herself somebody, all traced back through 100 quiet channels to the daughter who cleans homes. After supper, I stayed to help clear the table, because of course I did. And that is when I saw the letter. It was sitting in the pile of mail on the counter, half under a grocery flyer, and I would have left it alone except for the return address, the bank. I have a professional relationship with that particular envelope. I slid it out just far enough to read the line through the window, and there it was in official gray type. Mortgage account paid in full. I knew it was paid in full. I am the one who paid it. In the spring of 2018, my father was 4 months behind, and the letters had started using words like acceleration and foreclosure. And I had wired 148,000 to clear the whole thing on the condition that the bank kept my name out of it, and told my parents only that an anonymous arrangement had settled the account. I did it that way on purpose. I did not want it hanging over anyone's head. I just wanted my father to keep his house. I set the letter back exactly where it had been, and as I did, my eye went up to the refrigerator, where my mother keeps her little inspirational cards. There was a new one pinned under a magnet in her looping hand. "Thank you, Lord, for carrying this family through our hardest year." I read it twice. Our hardest year. She had turned the year I saved their house into a testimony about her own faith, and she had signed it in gratitude to God. And nowhere, not on that card, not at that table, not in 15 years, was there a single line that read, "Thank you, Morgan." I wiped down the counter. I put the sponge in the sink, and I understood, standing in my parents' kitchen, that I had spent a decade paying for a house whose story had no room in it for me at all. Let me take you back to that wire, because it is the center of everything that happened at the dinner spring 2018. My father called me, which never happened, and his voice had a crack in it I had never heard from him. He did not ask for money. He was too proud for that even then. He just said things were tight, and the bank was being difficult. And did I know anyone who understood paperwork? I understood paperwork. I drove the 90 minutes that same night. I sat at their kitchen table and I read the foreclosure notice, and I did the thing I do. I found the mess and I cleaned it. I paid the errors. Then I paid the balance, the whole 148,000 because half measures leave the wound open. And here is the part I need you to hear, because it is where my mother's real talent showed itself. I told her plainly, let me handle this. And please don't make it a thing. Don't tell the family. I don't want anyone owing me. I said it to spare everyone the debt. She agreed so fast it should have warned me. Then she went out into the world and told her sisters, her church, her friends, that she and Roger had buckled down and clawed their way out of the hole through sheer grit and prayer. She took the one thing I asked her to keep quiet, and she used the quiet not to protect me, but to erase me. My silence became her stage. For years, I let it stand because arguing would have meant explaining, and explaining would have meant becoming in her mouth the daughter who lords her money over her poor, struggling parents. She had me boxed in beautifully. I could stay generous and invisible, or I could speak up and become the villain. So, I stayed invisible. I told myself it was the high road. Really, it was just the quiet one. And quiet is where she does her best work. I need to stop here and answer the question I can feel you asking. Because if I do not, you will spend the rest of this story thinking I was a fool. Why did I keep sending money to people who treated me like that? Why not cut them off, let the truth land where it may? Believe me, I ran that scenario 100 times. I even started twice. Once I called the broker and told him to stop the insurance premium. And then I pictured my father in a hospital hallway with no coverage. And I called back within the hour. Once I drafted an email to my whole family laying it all out, every dollar, every year. And I read it over and deleted it because I could hear exactly how my mother would spend it. She would not deny the money. She was smarter than that. She would weep about how her successful daughter was humiliating them, waving her checkbook, tearing the family apart over pride. And people would believe her because people always believe the one who cries first. That is the trap. And I want you to understand it is a real trap, not a weak one. When someone controls the story, the truth alone is not enough. You need a room. You need witnesses. You need a moment where the truth arrives faster than the spin. And you cannot manufacture that moment. You can only recognize it when it comes. So I waited, not passively. Understand. I kept every record. I paid every bill through channels I could trace. I stayed ready. I told myself that one day the right room would open. And until then, I would keep my father housed and my sister degreed, and my own name off the credits. Maybe that was hope again, dressed up as strategy. But I was not a fool. I was a woman holding a lit match in a windstorm, waiting for the wind to die. It was about to. At the rehearsal supper before I found the bank letter, Delia had told a story I need you to have, because it becomes important. Someone asked how she got into nursing, and my sister sat down her wine and told the table her favorite version of herself. Honestly, I owe everything to Mom and Dad. She said they sacrificed so much to put me through the program. I don't know how they did it. My mother lowered her eyes modestly, accepting the tribute. My father nodded like a man remembering a hardship, and I sat very still because I was the one who did it. Between 2015 and 2017, I paid 32 zallos in tuition for my sister's nursing degree. I paid it in installments, semester by semester. And being the person I apparently am, I routed it through my mother because Delia was young and proud, and I did not want her to feel like she owed her big sister. I told my mother to give it to Delia as coming from the family. That was my exact mistake, the same one twice. I handed the money to the one person who would turn my generosity into her own legend. Delia grew up believing our parents had bled for her degree, and she loved them for it. And she looked at me across 15 years as the sister who never made anything of herself. I could have corrected her at that table. I could have said, "Sweetheart, I signed those checks." But she was glowing, newly engaged, and I was not going to detonate her happiness over a receipt. So I let her finish her story. I let her thank the wrong people, and I felt underneath my calm a new and specific kind of tired. The tired of watching someone you carried thank the people who watched you carry them. Delia had a nursing license with my invisible signature under it. And she was about to marry into the one family in Millbrook that could pull that signature into the light. Back at the Millbrook Inn that night, I did something I had not done in a long time. I opened my suitcase and took out an envelope. I carry the way some people carry a photograph of someone they lost. It is a plain manila envelope, soft at the corners now from handling. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, and I emptied it onto the coverlet. 3 things laid out in a row under the lamp. The first was the bank letter from 2018. My copy, the one that says the account was settled in full by an anonymous arrangement. The 138,000 dated in my father's worst spring. The second was a bundle of cancelled checks held with a paperclip. My sister's tuition semester by semester, with 32,000 across 2 years. Each memo line reading the same careful lie I had asked the bank to help me tell. Gift do not disclose. And the third was the one that still catches me. It is a birthday card. Years ago I mailed my father a card. Nothing dramatic. Just a card that said I was thinking of him. It came back to me unopened, returned to sender in my mother's handwriting, and I never knew if he even saw it. I kept it sealed. I have carried an unopened birthday card to my own father for years, because throwing it away felt like agreeing with them. I sat there, and I looked at the 3 things laid out in the lamplight, and the whole shape of my life was suddenly very simple and very heavy. The house, the degree, the unopened card, everything my family was about to celebrate that weekend. Everything they built their pride on, I had already paid for. And it all fit inside one soft envelope that nobody but me had ever seen. I did not cry over it. I had cried that out years ago. I just sat with it, this small paper record of a decade of being erased, and I made myself a quiet promise that I did not fully believe yet. I promised myself that whatever happened at that dinner, I was done keeping the envelope shut. My phone rang before I could sit too long with all of it, and it was Marisol again, which was almost a mercy. There is something steadying about a work problem when your family is dismantling you in slow motion. Sorry to call so late, she said. The Cedar Hollow account. Their spring inspection got moved up, and I want your eyes on the readiness report before I send it. I told her to walk me through it. We went line by line, the two of us, at 10 at night, the way we have done for years, and by the end, the report was clean and the account was solid. Before she hung up, Marisol said, "You know that place practically worships you." I told her not to exaggerate. "I'm not," she said. "They ask about you every visit." I sat with the phone dark in my hand after she was gone. Cedar Hollow of all the accounts, that one. I thought about the venue on Saturday, and I nearly laughed out loud in that quiet hotel room because my family had booked their proudest night into a building my company keeps standing. I did not tell Marisol that. I did not tell anyone. I just did what I always do. When the pieces get too heavy to hold, I put them down and I picked up the next task. Somebody has to clean it up. I said it to myself out of habit. The way I have said it 10,000 times, the reflex that has run my whole adult life. Somebody has to clean it up. I meant the inspection. I meant the linens, the caterer, the seating chart, all of it. I did not know yet that in 2 days I would say those exact words again out loud in front of everyone, and that they would stop being about mops and floors, and become the truest thing I ever said to my mother's face. I lay awake that night in the Millbrook Inn, thing I promised myself I would not do, which is arguing with my own mother in my head. In the argument, I finally said it. I laid the envelope on her kitchen table, and I watched her face come apart. Then I turned the lamp back on, and I looked at the real envelope on the real coverlet, and I thought about actually bringing it Saturday, sliding it out at the dinner, ending the whole charade in front of the good in-laws. I picked it up, I held it, and then I put it back in the suitcase and zipped it shut, because I could hear my own voice, being reasonable the way it always talks me down. "Not at Delia's dinner," it said, "not her night. You are not the kind of person who blows up a party. And that was true. I was not that person. I had spent 15 years being the opposite of that person. The one who absorbs, the one who cleans, the one who leaves early with her exit line ready. So I made the safe plan one more time. Gray dress, quiet smile. Congratulations. So happy for you both. Early meeting, drive home before dessert. I would let my mother introduce me as the daughter who helps at a cleaning place. I would sit through it, the way I had sat through 100 versions of it. I would keep the envelope shut. I actually fell asleep believing that, which tells you how deep the habit ran. I want you to remember when we get to that room that I walked into it, planning to disappear one more time. Everything that happened because a stranger stood up before I could shrink. I did not bring the envelope to explode the dinner. I brought it because I could not leave it in the car. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole story. The morning before the dinner, I finally opened the actual invitation Delia had sent, the physical card, because until then, I had only known the date. I sat at the little hotel desk with my coffee, and I read the location line, and my coffee stopped halfway to my mouth. The engagement dinner will be held in the private dining room at Cedar Hollow Senior Living. I read it 3 times. Cedar Hollow, my account, my people, the building my company has kept clean and licensed and open for 6 years. Let me tell you what Cedar Hollow means to me, because now it matters. In 2020, that place was 90 days from being shut down by the state. Their old cleaning contractor had let sanitation slip so badly that an inspector had flagged them for conditions that endanger residents. And a care home with that on its record does not reopen. It closes, and the families come and take their mothers and fathers away in the middle of the worst year any of us remember. Margaret Voss, who owns the place, who inherited it from her own father, called Reliant in a panic. I took that account personally. I was 28. I ran that building myself for 3 weeks, day and night, retrained their staff, rebuilt every protocol. And I stood beside Margaret Voss when the inspector came back, and I watched a 70-year-old woman cry when her family's life work got to keep its doors open. She gripped my wrist. She said thank you like it was the only word she had left. She has never forgotten my face. And now 6 years later, my parents had booked their proudest night. The night they planned to parade me as their family disappointment into the one room in Millbrook that belongs in every way that counts to me. My mother thought she was walking into a display of the Atwoods for their important, new in-laws. She was walking her whole careful story straight into the one witness who could take it apart with a single sentence. And I knew it and she did not. From that moment, Saturday at 6000 stopped being a date on a card and became a countdown. Delia texted me the final details that afternoon, brisk and managing. Saturday, 6 sharp, Cedar Hollow, private room. Please be early to help set up. And Morgan, keep it low, key, okay? Margaret Voss is kind of a big deal. I looked at that message for a long time. Keep it low key. Margaret Voss is kind of a big deal. My sister was warning me to be small in front of a woman who had cried into my sleeve. I typed back that I would be there early. Then I sat with the countdown. Every road in this story now led to that room at that hour. My mother would be there running her production. My father would be there with his line loaded. Delia would be there glowing. And Margaret Voss would be there, not as some distant grande dame, but as the host, the owner of the building, the mother of the groom, standing at the head of a table where the Atwoods planned to introduce me as nobody. I thought about calling Margaret ahead of time. I actually pulled up her number, my thumb over the call button. I could warn her. I could ask her to keep quiet. I could stage manage the whole thing so no one got surprised. And then I put the phone down because it was not my night to hijack. Whatever Margaret Voss did when she saw me would be honest. And I had spent 15 years starved for one honest moment at a family table. I was not going to script it. I was going to walk in as the daughter who cleans homes, exactly as my mother wanted, and let the room decide what was true. 2 days, then 1. The countdown ran, and my mother spent every hour of it polishing a story. she did not know was already broken, and I spent every hour of it strangely, dangerously calm. The night before, my mother called me at the hotel for one last round of coaching, and I let her, because by then, I was almost enjoying the dramatic irony of it. "Morgan," she said in her serious voice, "tomorrow is important. The Vosses own half the good name in this town. Margaret Voss is not the kind of woman you impress by talking about scrubbing floors." I said I understood. "So please," she went on, "no mop talk. If she asks what you do, just say you work at a cleaning company and change the subject. Let me carry the conversation." I almost laughed into the phone. Let me carry the conversation. My mother was about to walk into Margaret Voss's own dining room and try to manage what Margaret Voss thought of me. It was like watching someone rehearse a speech to the ocean about how the tide should behave. "I won't bring up the floors, Mom," I told her, which was technically a promise I fully intended to keep. I was not going to bring up the floors. I was not going to have to. She thanked me, relieved, and then she added softer, "The thing that stayed with me. This family finally has a chance to look like something. Morgan, don't take that from us. Don't take that from us." As if I had ever taken anything. As if I had not spent 15 years handing them everything and letting them keep the credit. I told her good night. I set the phone on the nightstand, next to the suitcase with the envelope in it. And I lay there in the dark, and I felt the last of my old habit finally loosen its grip. Not because I had a plan. I did not have a plan. I just knew the way you know whether that tomorrow, the story my mother had spent 15 years telling was going to meet a room that already knew better. There was one more thing I did not know yet, and it came from Aunt Carol, my mother's younger sister, who has never in her life kept a secret she found interesting. She caught me in the parking lot of the Caterers the day before the dinner, both of us picking up trays, and she leaned in with that gossip-warm smile. "Your mother is a piece of work. You know that," she said, fond and sharp at once. "She showed me that magazine last year, the one with you in it, Business Owner of the Year or whatever. And you know what she told me? She said it wasn't really you. Said it was some other Morgan Atwood. That the two of you just had the same name." I stood very still, holding a tray of stuffed mushrooms, a magazine with me in it. I knew exactly the one. A regional business feature from 2 years back. My face on a page under the words Business Owner of the Year, Facility Services. I had mailed my mother a copy. I had actually let myself hope mailing it that she would be proud, that she would finally have something she could not shove. "She said it wasn't me," I repeated. Aunt Carol shrugged, oblivious to the ground shifting under me. "You know your mother. She likes the story the way she likes it." Then she took her trays and went, humming, leaving me standing in a parking lot with a truth I had not been ready for. It was one thing to think my mother did not know what I had become. It was another thing entirely to learn that she knew that she had held the proof in her hands, seen my face on a magazine page, and looked her own sister in the eye and called it a coincidence. My mother had not overlooked me out of ignorance. She had erased me on purpose, and I was about to find out just how far she had taken it. I sat in my car in that Caterers lot for a while after Aunt Carol left, and I let myself put the whole picture together, because I had been avoiding it for years. 2 years ago, that magazine had come out. I remember the day the photographer left my office. How strange it felt to be looked at like someone who had done something. The feature ran 4 pages. It talked about the company, the 180 employees, the contracts, the woman who started with a bucket at 19, and I, 34 years old and apparently still 19 inside, had mailed a copy to my mother with a sticky note that said, "Just thought you might like to see." I never heard a word back. I told myself it got lost in the mail. Now I knew where it went. She kept it. She showed it around, and to every person who saw my face on that page and said, "Wet, isn't that your Morgan?" My mother said, "No, just a coincidence. Same name. It wasn't really her." Do you understand what that takes? It would have been easier to be proud. It would have cost her nothing to say, Yes, that's my daughter. And bask a little. Instead, she chose every single time the harder work of erasing me. Because a proud daughter with a company is a daughter who does not need her. And a daughter who does not need her is a daughter she cannot control. My whole life I had thought my mother's cruelty was a kind of blindness. It was not blindness. It was maintenance. She kept me small on purpose because small was useful. And every belittling word at every table had not been carelessness. It had been the careful ongoing labor of keeping her most capable child convinced she was nothing. I put the car in drive. I was not angry, exactly. I was clear. And clear in my experience is far more dangerous than angry. If you have ever handed your family the proof of who you are, and watched them file it in a drawer, you already know the sound my chest made in that parking lot. Stay with me. What happened at that dinner is the part they never saw coming, and honestly, the part I did not plan either. If this is landing for you, tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and subscribe so the ending finds you. That night, the night before the dinner, I could not stay in the hotel room, so I drove to Cedar Hollow. I did not go in. I parked across the lot, and I looked at the building the way you look at something you helped save, with a feeling that does not have a clean name. The windows were warm. Somewhere in there were 80 residents sleeping safe, because 6 years ago, I had refused to let the state close their doors. I sat in my car, and I thought about how the next evening I would walk through those same doors as the family embarrassment, and my mother would introduce me to the owner of the building as a woman who scrubs other people's houses. The absurdity of it was almost peaceful. While I was sitting there, a side door opened, and one of the night aides came out to the smoking bench. An older woman named Rosa, who has worked there since before my contract. She saw my car and she squinted, and then she lifted a hand and called across the lot. "Miss Atwood, that you?" I rolled down the window. We talked for a few minutes. The easy talk of people who have gotten a hard thing done together. And before she went back in, Rosa said, "You still keeping us running. You know that. Every family in there sleeps because of you." Then the door closed and I was alone again in the dark lot. And I want to tell you the truth about what almost happened next. I almost drove home right then, 75 or 90 minutes back to my quiet life, where strangers call me Ms. Atwood and mean it. I almost skipped the whole dinner. I sat with my hand on the gear shift for a long time. In the end, I did not go home, and I've asked myself since whether that was strength or just the old habit of showing up. Either way, I stayed. I am glad I stayed. Saturday came the way big days come, ordinary until they are not. My mother had asked me to arrive early to help set up, and I want you to appreciate the shape of that request. She asked me, the owner of the company that services the building, to come early and tidy the room for the party celebrating the sister whose degree I paid for. I said yes because saying yes was still that morning a reflex I had not yet unlearned. I got to Cedar Hollow at 4. The private dining room was lovely. The staff had it half ready, and my mother met me at the door with a list. "Wipe down the tables, would you? The caterer left them sticky. And you're good at that sort of thing." She said it without a flicker, without the smallest awareness of what she was asking or where or of whom. "You're good at that sort of thing." So, I picked up a cloth and I wiped down the tables in a dining room my own company is contracted to maintain in a building I saved for a party I had secretly paid the $95 an hour for while my sister drifted through in her dress and said to no one in particular, "God, she really will clean anything, won't she?" A few relatives laughed. I kept wiping. I could feel the cloth in my hand and the cool grain of the table, and the whole enormous weight of the joke. I was living inside, and I did not say a word. Here is the thing about wiping down a table you own the right to be honored in. It gives you a very steady hand. By the time I set the cloth down, the room was gleaming and full of flowers. And I stepped back to look at it, and I thought quietly, this is the last thing I will ever clean for these people. I was right, though not in the way I expected. While I was finishing the tables, I overheard the conversation that took the last soft thing out of me. My mother was near the flowers with Aunt Carol and two other relatives, and she had that glow she gets when she is telling a story that makes her the heroine. You know, she said, Roger and I saved for 2 years to give Delia this dinner. 2 years. We wanted her to have something beautiful, something the Vosses would respect. Aunt Carol made an admiring sound, and I stood there, with the cloth in my hand, because I knew down to the dollar that my parents had not saved a cent for this dinner. 6 weeks earlier, Delia had called me sweet as pie and said, Mom was stressed about the cost of the engagement dinner, and could I maybe help just this once? Family is family. I had wired my mother $9,500 for the venue and the catering and the flowers I was at that moment arranging. I had sent it, as always quietly told her, to let Delia think it came from her parents, because I did not want my sister to feel like she owed me on her happiest week. And here was my mother in the room those dollars had paid for, telling her own sister that she and Roger had scrimped and saved for 2 years to make it happen. I felt something in my chest go very cold and very still. It is one thing to be erased. I had made an ugly peace with being erased. It is another thing to stand in a room you paid for, holding a cleaning cloth you were handed like a servant, and listen to the person who took your money describe her own imaginary sacrifice to a captive audience. I set the cloth down on the tray. I did not decide anything yet, but something that had been shut for 15 years came unlatched, and I could feel the draft of it. I needed air. So I walked out to the parking lot before the guests arrived, and I stood by my car with my hand on the door handle, and I came within 1 second of leaving. I want to be honest about how close it was. The whole plan was right there. Get in the car, drive the 90 minutes home, send a text tomorrow. So sorry, wasn't feeling well. Congratulations again. Nobody would have chased me. My family half expected me to fail to show up in spirit anyway. My hand was on the handle and I stood there, and I thought about the envelope in my suitcase, back at the hotel and the mortgage, and the tuition, and the magazine she called a coincidence, and the 2 years she never saved. And I felt the old reflex fighting the new clarity. Somebody has to clean it up against. I am done cleaning up after them. I honestly do not know which one would have won, because I never got to finish the argument. Miss Atwood. I turned around. A tall man in a good suit was coming across the lot toward me, with his hand already out, and a wide-open smile. And I knew him before he said his name, because I had seen his photograph on Margaret Voss's desk 6 years ago. Ethan Voss, the groom, my sister's fiancé. He shook my hand warmly, both hands, the way people do when they are genuinely glad, and he said loud enough that a cluster of my arriving relatives turned to look. Miss Atwood, I can't believe it's you. My mother has told me about you 100 times. Behind him, near the entrance, I saw my cousin Denise stopped dead, a strange look crossing her face, the first Atwood to sense that the ground was moving. And just like that, my hand came off the car door, and there was no leaving anymore. Ethan Voss stood there in the parking lot beaming at me, like I was a celebrity who had wandered into his party, and I realized he genuinely did not know. He did not know I was Delia's sister. To him, I was Miss Atwood, the woman from the story his mother told at Cedar Hollow board meetings, the one who saved the family business. You have to understand, he said, still holding my hand. My mom talks about you like you hung the moon. Cedar Hollow is her whole life. It's my whole life now, too. I run the operation side, and everybody who works there knows the name Morgan Atwood. He laughed, delighted by the coincidence he thought this was. What are the odds you'd be at Delia's dinner? Do you know the family? And there it was, the fork in the road. I could have said it right then. I could have said, Ethan, Delia is my sister. I watched the sentence sit on my tongue, but something told me not to spend it in a parking lot, quietly, where my mother could still get out ahead of it and spin it into a coincidence. Same name, some other Morgan. So, I said carefully, I know the family well. I'd like tonight to be Delia's, though. Can I ask you to let your mother be the one to say hello to me inside? Ethan looked at me for a second, a good-natured man, sensing there was a story here he could not see. And to his credit, he did not push. Of course, he said, whatever you need. He was decent. I want that on the record because a lot of what happened next was ugly, and Ethan Voss was not part of the ugliness. He was just a kind man who loved my sister and admired me, and had no idea those two facts were about to collide in the same room. I told myself one last time, somebody has to clean it up. This time it did not sound like surrender. At 600, I walked into that private dining room, and this is where the story catches up to where we started. 20 people, candlelight, my sister's ring throwing sparks. I was in the plain gray dress, and my hands still carried the faint smell of the cleaning solution from wiping the tables. Which I found almost funny, walking and smelling like my own company. My mother spotted me, and her face did the calculation it always does, checking that I had come dressed to be unremarkable. I had, she was pleased. At the head of the room, near the flowers I had arranged, stood Margaret Voss with her back to me, greeting an older couple, silver hair, straight spine, the unmistakable bearing of a woman who has run something hard for a long time. My mother took my elbow. Come, she said low and quick. Let me introduce you to the Vosses and get it over with. Get it over with. She steered me across the room toward the head table, like I was a chore she wanted checked off before the real evening began. I let her steer me. I did not resist, did not slow down, did not say a word. I want you to understand that I walked into that moment obediently, exactly as she wanted. The daughter who cleans homes being marched over to be introduced to important people. My father saw us coming and sat down his drink, arranging his face into the expression he uses for his favorite joke. The one about how they stopped expecting anything from me. Delia hovered nearby, watching to make sure I behaved. Every one of them was in position, and Margaret Voss, hearing my mother approach, began to turn around. I remember thinking in the last calm second before it happened that I had no idea what she would do. I truly did not. I had left it to the room to decide what was true, and the room was about to answer. My mother squared her shoulders, put on her brightest company smile, and delivered the line she had been rehearsing all week. Margaret, she said warmly, presenting me with a small flourish. I want you to meet the rest of the family. This is our other daughter. A beat, a little apologetic laugh. She cleans homes. She said it lightly, the way you mention a relative's unfortunate hobby, softening it with a smile so no one would think she was unkind. And my father, right on cue, chuckled into his glass and added his favorite line to the good-in-laws. We stopped expecting anything from her years ago. A couple of the Voss relatives smiled politely. The way you smile at a joke you do not quite understand. My mother beamed, satisfied. The introduction handled, the awkward daughter accounted for, the story intact. I stood there in my gray dress and I said the only thing I had planned to say all night. Good evening. That was all. I did not defend myself. I did not correct her. I had learned a long time ago that there is a kind of power in not reaching for the thing everyone expects you to grab. And I let the silence sit exactly where my mother had put it. She thought the silence meant I had accepted my part. She was already turning to move the conversation along, already reaching for her wine, already composing the next charming thing. She had done it 1,000 times. She had no reason to think this time would be any different. And it would not have been. It truly would not have been if Margaret Voss had not finished turning around. Because Margaret was still mid-motion when my mother said she cleans homes, and she came the rest of the way around, just as my father delivered his line, and she was looking directly at my face when the words landed. And that is the moment the whole room started to change, and Margaret Voss looked at me, and I watched her face travel through a sequence I will never forget. First, the polite hostess smile, ready to greet the awkward relative. Then, a small pause, a flicker. The look of someone who has seen a face they cannot place. Then her eyes went from my shoes up to my face. Slow, careful, the exact appraisal my mother gives me. Except Margaret was reading something entirely different. And then she went still. Completely still, the way a room goes still when the power cuts out. Wet, she said. Her voice had dropped. The candle light caught the confusion and the dawning both. Wait, aren't you the woman who? And she stopped. She just stopped. One hand rising toward her mouth. Because whatever she had been about to say was too big for a doorway introduction, too big for she cleans homes, and she knew it before she finished. The room felt the stop. You know how a table full of talking people can go quiet all at once without a signal. Just a sudden collective sense that something is happening. Forks paused. A relative's laugh died in his throat. Delia a few feet away said, "Mum." In a small uncertain voice. And my mother. My mother's face, which had been so bright and so certain a moment before, began to drain. I watched the color go out of it. I watched her look at Margaret Voss, then at me, then back at Margaret, and I watched her understand, all at once, and far too late, that she had walked her careful story into a room that already knew the truth. She looked like she had seen a ghost, and in a way she had. She had spent 15 years burying the daughter who cleans homes, and that daughter was standing in a candle-lit room in a building she saved, being recognized by name, and there was nothing my mother could say fast enough to put her back in the ground. Margaret Voss found her voice, and when she did not lower it. She let it carry to every corner of that room. "You're Morgan Atwood," she said, and it was not a question anymore. "You own Reliant Facility Group." She took a step toward me, away from her guests, her eyes bright and wet. "You're the woman who saved Cedar Hollow." The room did not make a sound. 6 years ago, the state was 90 days from shutting us down, 90 days from putting 80 residents out and closing the doors my father opened. And this woman, Margaret said, turning now to the whole table, her voice thick. This woman walked in and ran my building herself for 3 weeks. She retrained my staff. She stood next to me when the inspector came back. She kept our license. She kept my father's home open. Margaret crossed the last of the distance and took both my hands and hers the way she had 6 years ago. And she looked at my mother over my shoulder. "I have thanked God for this woman every single day for 6 years, she said. "And you introduce her as what?" Nobody moved. I saw Ethan near the window go completely still as the pieces landed for him. "This woman, my mother's savior, is Delia's sister." I saw Delia's mouth fall open. I saw my father set his glass down very slowly, as if a loud noise might make it worse. And my mother stood frozen at the head of the room. She had wanted so badly to command, her mouth working, no sound coming out. Margaret was still holding my hands. "The Vosses owe this family nothing," she said quiet now, to my mother directly. "We owe this family everything, and it is because of her, not because of anyone at this table who is laughing. I had waited 15 years for a room. I had told you back at the hotel that the truth is not enough on its own. That you need witnesses. You need a moment where truth arrives faster than the spin. This was the room. This was the moment. And I had not said a single word to make it happen. My mother did what my mother does. She reached for the spin. Even now, even here." She gave a little laugh, high and brittle, and she said, "Oh, Margaret, I think there's some confusion. Morgan helps out at a cleaning company she doesn't own. She owns Reliant." Margaret's voice cut across hers, flat and certain. "I sign the contract every year. 2.4 million a year. Sharon. 180 employees. I have sat across a table from your daughter and watched her save my life's work." The number landed in the room like a drop tray. 2.4 million. I watched it hit my relatives one by one. The aunts, the cousins, the Voss guests. All of them recalculating 15 years of a story in real time. My mother's mouth opened and closed. And then, because she is nothing if not resourceful, she switched tactics midair, the way she always does when the first lie fails. Her eyes filled, her chin trembled. "We don't," she said, wounded now, reaching for the sympathy she has always been able to summon. "We're a private family, Margaret. We don't brag about our children. We don't parade our you didn't fail to brag. Margaret said it gently, almost sadly, which was somehow worse than anger. You told this table she cleans homes and laughed about it. My mother had no answer for that, because there was no answer for that. I watched her stand there. The tears she had summoned, now stranded on her face with no story to serve. And for the first time in my life, I saw my mother without her most powerful tool. She had lost control of the room. She had walked in holding the narrative the way she has held it my whole life. And in the space of 90 seconds, a woman she was trying to impress had taken it out of her hands and said it plainly in the light. And I still had not spoken. But I was about to, because the truth Margaret told was only the part she could see. The rest was mine. It was Delia who broke first. And I had not expected it to land on her the way it did. My sister had gone pale and small in her beautiful dress, and she stepped toward me and her voice came out young. "Morgan," she said. "Is it true the magazine?" Mom said. "She told me it wasn't really you." There it was, the thread pulling loose in her too. I looked at my sister and I saw for just a second something honest cross her face. A genuine horror at the size of what she had believed. She had spent her whole adult life thinking her big sister was a failure because our mother had worked hard to make sure she thought so. That flicker of shame was real. I will give her that. But Delia is our mother's daughter too. And the honesty did not last. Almost as fast as the shame came, the defense rose up behind it, and her next words were not, "I'm sorry." They were, "Well, why didn't you just tell me? If it was true, why did you let me think? You could have said something." And there it was. Somehow, in the space of one breath, my sister had made her 15 years of contempt into my failure to correct it. "Why didn't you just tell me?" As if I had not tried. As if the woman standing frozen behind her had not spent those same 15 years making sure the telling never took. I looked at Delia, and I did not soften, and I did not sharpen. I just said quietly, "I did tell you, Delia. I told you every time I paid a bill you never knew about." Her face changed. She did not understand yet, but she was starting to. And I could see the next question forming. The one that was going to take the floor out from under her entirely, and I decided I was done letting other people say my truth for me. Margaret had opened the door. It was time for me to walk through it. I set my glass down on the table. I did it slowly, and the small sound of it seemed very loud, and every face in that room turned to me, because I had not spoken more than good evening all night. And now I was clearly going to. I want you to know that I was not shaking. My voice when it came was low and even, the same voice I used to walk a facilities manager through a spill report at midnight. "I wasn't going to say anything tonight," I said. "I came here to smile and leave early. That was the plan." I looked around the table at the aunts, at the bosses, at my white-faced mother, at my father who would not meet my eyes. But since we're being honest about who I am, let's be honest about all of it. I let that sit. My father lost this family's house in 2018. The bank was ready to take it. I paid it off. The $148,000. I asked that it be kept quiet, and my mother agreed. And then she told everyone that she and Dad clawed their way out through prayer and grit. I turned to Delia. "Your nursing degree, the $32,000 over 2 years. I paid every semester. I sent it through Mom because you were young, and I didn't want you to feel you owed me. She let you believe it came from her." Delia made a sound like the wind had been knocked out of her. And then I said the last one, the one I had overheard that very afternoon. And I kept my voice as gentle as I could make it, because gentle was so much heavier than shouting. "And this dinner, this beautiful dinner you're all sitting at, I paid for it, $9,500. I wired it to Mom 6 weeks ago because Delia asked me to help." I looked at my mother. "You told Aunt Carol you and Dad saved for 2 years. I heard you say it this afternoon while I was wiping down your tables. That's a lie." My mother's voice cracked out across the room too loud. "The first crack in the dam. That is a lie, Morgan. How dare you at your own sister's, Sharon." Aunt Carol's voice from the side of the room, quiet and stunned. Every head turned. My aunt was staring at my mother with a look I had never seen her wear. The look of someone watching a person they thought they knew come apart. "You told me you saved for 2 years," Aunt Carol said slowly. "You stood right there by the flowers an hour ago, and told me you and Roger scrimmed for 2 years to give Delia this night. I heard you." The room went so quiet you could hear the candles. My mother turned to her sister, and for one instant, I saw her reach for a story and find nothing there. Because Aunt Carol was not a stranger she could spin. Aunt Carol had been standing right there. And that was the moment the deepest thing came out. The thing that was worse than the money, worse than the magazine. My mother had not just erased me. She had taken the money I sent to help my family and used it to build a version of herself as the sacrificing hero. And she had done it knowing I would be standing in the room, holding a cleaning cloth, while she took the bows. She rotted my love through her hands and kept the credit, and left me the shame on purpose for 15 years. And the person who did that to me was not a stranger, or an in-law, or an enemy. It was my mother. My father finally spoke, and all he said, barely above a whisper staring at the tablecloth, was, "Sharon, what did you do?" And my mother, cornered out of stories with her own sister and her own husband and a room full of witnesses, looking at her, did the only thing she had left. She stopped crying and she got loud. My mother turned on me and every soft thing dropped off her face at once. "After everything I have done for this family," she said. And now she was not weeping. Now she was shaking with a fury that had been waiting under the tears the whole time. "I raised you. I fed you. And this is what you do. You stand here in front of the bosses and try to humiliate your own mother, waving your money around like it makes you better than us. You always thought you were better than us." Her voice climbed. A Voss cousin looked at his plate. "Fine," she spat. "Fine, keep your money. We never asked you for a dime." That one almost made me laugh, because Delia had called me 6 weeks ago and asked for exactly a dime. 9,500 of them. But I did not laugh, because a woman coming apart in a candle-lit room is not funny even when she has earned it. Margaret Voss said, cold as I have ever heard a person be, "Sharon, sit down." And my mother, for once in her life, had no one on her side to perform for, no audience willing to believe the tears. And she stood there breathing hard in the wreck of her own party. I let the room settle, then I spoke, and I kept my voice exactly where it had been all night, low and steady, because I had finally understood something my mother never would. That the person who stays calm is the person who is already won. "You called me the daughter who cleans homes," I said. She glared at me, chest heaving. "You're right, I do." I paused. "I've been cleaning up after this family for 15 years. The house, the degree, the medication, this dinner, all of it. You just never once had to see the bill." The line landed in the silence and stayed there. My mother had spent 15 years turning "she clean homes" into an insult. I had just turned it into the truest thing anyone said all night. I turned to my father, because he had been sitting there, this whole time saying almost nothing, hiding behind his own famous line, and I was not gonna let him keep hiding. "Dad," I said. He made himself look at me. 15 years ago. You told the neighbor you'd stopped expecting anything from me. You said it like it was a relief." His jaw worked. "You were right to stop expecting things in a way," I said, "because I stopped giving them to people who couldn't see me. So here's what happens now. Next month, the mortgage is yours. The insurance premium is yours. The medication is yours. Everything I've quietly carried, you carry now. I'm not doing it out of spite. I'm doing it because you told me 15 years ago to stop. And it took me this long to finally listen." My father did not argue. He just closed his eyes, and I saw his own words come back and settle on his shoulders. And for the first time, I did not feel the need to lift them off him. Then I turned to Delia, who was crying openly now, and this was the hardest one because Delia is not my mother. Not all the way. "I don't hate you," I told her. "But your whole adult life had my name written underneath it. And you spent tonight and 100 nights before it laughing at the person who signed the checks. You asked why. I didn't just tell you. I think somewhere you didn't want to know. Knowing would have meant thanking me, and it was easier to thank the people who made you comfortable. She reached for my hand. I let her hold it for a moment, because she is still my sister, and I am not built to be cruel to the ones who are only guilty of not looking. But I did not tell her it was all right, because it was not, and pretending would have been just another kind of cleaning up after this family, and I was finished with that. Margaret Voss came and stood beside me. So did Ethan, and the two families I had walked in belonging to neither of finally sorted themselves out. There was one thing left to do, and I had brought it with me, though I still had not been sure I would use it. When I left the hotel that evening, I had taken the manila envelope out of my suitcase on an impulse. I did not examine and put it in my bag. Now I took it out. I did not brandish it. I did not throw it down. I simply walked to the head of the table where my mother stood, and I set it on the linen in front of her softly. The way you set down something you are finished carrying. This is everything, I said. The bank letter, the tuition checks, the dinner, it's all in there. Dated every dollar. I've been holding it for years, Mom, waiting for you to say thank you. I straightened up. You never did. So, keep the envelope. Consider it the last thing you'll ever get from me without being asked. My mother looked down at the soft brown paper on the tablecloth and did not touch it. She knew what it was. She had spent 15 years making sure nobody would ever see the contents, and now it sat in the middle of her ruined party in front of both families, and there was nothing left to spin. The room was silent except for the candles. I picked up my bag. I did not need to stay and watch her open it, because the opening was never the point. The point was that it was hers now. This record of everything she took and everything she hid, and she would have to live in the same house as it. I looked around the table one last time at the aunts, at my frozen father, at my crying sister, at the good Voss family who had walked into someone else's disaster with more grace than the people who caused it. And then I did the only thing I had actually planned to do all night. I said good night, and I turned to leave. Margaret Voss walked me out. She caught up to me in the corridor, that long, clean corridor I once ran for 3 weeks straight. And she took my arm, not to stop me, just to walk beside me. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't know she was your mother. If I had, I'd have found a gentler way. I told her there was no gentle way, and that she had given me the one honest moment I'd waited 15 years for, and I meant it. At the door, she stopped me. Come to the wedding, she said, not as anyone's cleaner, as my guest. I would be proud to have you at my son's wedding. Behind her, Ethan had followed us out. And he shook my hand again, and he said simply, I'm sorry for how they treated you. That's not the family I'm marrying into as far as I'm concerned. You'll always have a place at Cedar Hollow. I believed him. I want you to notice that I did not punish Ethan or Margaret for what my parents did. They had walked into a mess they did not make. And there is a version of me, the tired and angry version, that could have let the whole evening's coldness spill onto them. But you do not blame the guests for the host, and you do not make the innocent pay for the guilty, or you become a little bit of what hurt you. So I hugged Margaret, and I told Ethan I would be honored to come to the wedding. And I meant that, too. As for my family, I did the thing I should have done years ago, and it was quieter than you might expect. I did not scream, and I did not vanish. I simply closed the channels. The money that used to run through my mother's hands stopped for my father's heart medication, because I am still my father's daughter, even when he is not much of a father. I set up a small account that pays the pharmacy directly in my control, no one else's, so that his health never becomes my mother's story again. That is the boundary, not cruelty, just an end to being invisible. I will help where help is truly needed on my terms in the light, or I will not help at all. And I drove the 90 minutes home that night with the radio off and the windows down. And for the first time in 15 years, the car did not feel crowded. The sentence was not riding shotgun anymore. I had finally set it down. The people who decide you are worth nothing are almost always the ones quietly living off exactly what you are worth. That is the whole thing I learned, and I offer it to you for free. That's my story. 15 years of silence, one soft manila envelope, and a candle-lit room that finally saw me in a building I once saved in front of the people who swore I was nothing. If someone in your life has been carrying you while you called them small, say their name out loud this week. Thank them before a stranger has to do it for you, at a dinner table. And if this story reached something in you, share it with the person who needs to hear it tonight.